Joyce, I'm president of the Historical Society. We're very glad that you're here with us tonight. We always have our donation jar out. You know, if you're a nonprofit, your hand is always like this out. And there are also membership forms and newsletters. Our next program, which was not scheduled, or what it is going to be was not scheduled. It's going to be the fourth Wednesday again of next month, and it's going to be about indigenous plants from Michigan. Some of you may have noticed in front of our schoolhouse, there are all new plants there in Rock Garden. All of them are indigenous Michigan plants, and all of them have a sign in front of them of what they are. So if you want to know more about what you should be planting and what you should be pulling out, please come and see us the fourth Wednesday of next month. I don't think we're going to take any time introducing Craig, because most of you know him. He obviously is our curator at the museum and our local, is that the right word for you? Historian.
Sure.
Craig.
I remember years ago I had the Cadillac newspaper interviewed me back in the 90s, and they said, "How do you want to be known as?" I said, "Well, I work full time at Hayes, but then I kind of do this part time. Part-time historian. That'll work." So that was always my little handle, part-time historian. But
Craig, how did she spell that word, local?
yeah, loco. Yeah, it's loco. So, hysterical society.
That's right.
So thanks everybody for showing up. We're doing a live feed on Facebook. We already got a couple people on there right now. That'll be our first time doing that. And I am going to kind of pick on this guy right here. We're in the presence of greatness. His grandpa was Elvin Ellis. And Elvin Ellis was a professional photographer out of South Boardman. And a lot of the pictures in here was taken by Dick's grandpa. So without further ado, a lot of people, will say, like I did a program similar to this over 20 years ago at the, at that time it was still an elementary school where 22 to none is at now. But I always felt that I had to explain who I am. I have to give a description of my heritage. Because yes, I am a Fife Lake boy, but I got South Boardman roots that go back into the 1880s. And so with that being said, we'll get going. So my great grandma Althea Huff, she was born February 2nd, 1901 in South Boardman. And she lived to be, 99 and a half. And I would go there and talk to her in the rest home and stuff like that. And there she is later on after she'd married my great-grandpa Elmer Huff, who had worked for the GR&I Railroad and for the Pennsylvania Railroad and was a section foreman and stuff like that, retired out. But that was their home in South Boardman. But I would go up there and quiz her because she was a link. She was a definitive link. She was a link between all the stories and pictures you would hear, all the postcards and stuff. She was there. She was there at that stuff. It was, to touch her was touching the past, if that makes sense. To listen to her, you're listening to a voice that had went generations and generations. She had blonde hair, blue eyes. If anybody knows old Glenn Miller up to South Boardman, he has deep blue eyes and stuff like that, just like, because that's the Miller trait. But I would go up there and quiz her. I'd quiz her about different things about South Boardman. And I remember one time, she's like, you think just because I was born and raised in South Boardman, you think I should know everything about it? Well, I don't. And that's kind of where I'm at right now, too. So, there's a lot of stuff that's went on. A lot of years have went by. And even we can look in the modern world now, too. It's like, okay, when was the Village Market built in Fife Lake? When did the Kimball's go out? I mean, stuff that was somewhat recent, but yet we can't. It's hard to obtain. So it's going to be tricky going back into time. We're going to do our best. A lot of the stuff that I did do that I'm not going to read out of Travers' historical and descriptive book. If anybody wants interested in really early South Boardman stuff, you'll have to find a copy of that. We got a copy in the museum, a couple different copies in the Fife Lake Museum. Then they got stuff on Fife Lake and South Boardman, stuff like that goes back in the 1800s, in the very beginnings of it, that lists the names of the gentlemen. What I want to do is try and put stuff out there that is not recorded. And what I mean by not recorded is nobody knows where certain stores were. Okay, that's the big unknown. Where were the stores? Where were these buildings? Where were they at? You know, in conjunction with this, or what time period? So that's kind of what I'm going to try and hope to. So, of course, Althea later on, when she grew up, you might recognize that from the Yankee Boy, and there she is again, and her little brother Glenn, who died at 4 years of age. Now, the Leadersons are my great-grandpa's side, the Elmer Huff side, and she was a midwife in South Boardman, and that's in front of Edna Gehring's house right now. That's where that picture was taken. So my great-grandpa Elmer died, or his mom died in 1897 when he was like 3 years old, so he had to live with his grandma and grandpa, and that's his grandpa, his uncle, his grandma. So he had a tough life growing up. Whoops. So 1879 Michigan Gazetteer. It has William C. Gandy, Justice of Peace, and South Boardman, Hartman, Shirt, Smith, Stone. Stone was one of the ones that came in. But anyways, it's a hamlet of 30 inhabitants. 87 is starting to ramp up a little bit. So there's quite a few different businesses and stuff in town where now, it should give a population, 350. Thank you. Population 350. And 97 Michigan Gazetteer. Population 400. All the stores that are in now. So Eugene Perkins was had the grist mill initially. It was later known as Frank Young's. Frank Young's would have had the grist mill, but it was Eugene Perkins, and I think there was a man before him, but Eugene Perkins came into South Boardman fairly early. Now this, I'd like to use this too. If you come to my stuff, on Fife Lake stuff, it's like, oh, there's that D.C. Leach again. He's always talking about D.C. Leach. And the reason I talk about D.C. Leach, because that lake right there could have been known as Leach Lake after D.C. Leach. Now, D.C. Leach's brother, Wesley Leach, captain in the 4th Michigan Cavalry in the Civil War. He came to South Boardman like in 72, and the farm there where Ted McManus lives, there on the corner of Woodman and Hudson?
Yes.
Yeah. That was his farm. So in 82, I think after being out there in the country for 10 years, moved into South Boardman proper. But that's they're two brothers, Wesley Leach, or Captain Wesley Leach, who is at rest in South Boardman Cemetery. And I like Mark Tubbs. I told that sinking Mark Tubbs to show up last time he was at one of my programs. He's like, yeah, Boardman was all buildings and no trees. Now it's all trees and like no buildings. So, it's like 131 being here. Of course, the Wellman House still stands up. That's across from the Yankee Boy. You can see the Latter-day Saints Church out over here, the Methodist Church, the Lumberman's Tool Factory, Wellman's Mill, power plant. Now this is before, I think 1906. Another view from the east, there's the Latter-day Saints Church, M.R. Galuli. MR's house is right in here. And there's Gordon Aldridge's house, or Lisa's house, thank you. Lisa's house, but now it's a stone facade. And Boardman from the south. You got the school here. You got the Baptist church here, and then Jim Davis's house where Fred has that estate sale all the time, right here. And this was John Miller's house. Once again, it's Methodist Church in there, southwest. And you can see part of the Monroe block in here, but at this time it would have been the Hainstock block. And you can see part of the old school. Another good picture with the Wellman house with the logs down on Boardman Road, or Travers Street, if you will. Yeah, 131 would be up and through here. Memorial Day, Decoration Day, always big time for the Civil War veterans. Of course, 131 would be crossing here. This would be Supply Road, and this would be the road that they closed off to go to the cemetery. Another view of it. Whoops. So we're just going to try and get an ID right now where we're at. So I'm going to show you the Bristol cement block building manufacturer deal, which is right here. We've been right next to Dick's dad's house, Fred Ellis's house, because Fred Ellis had a house right here, Dick's dad. Methodist Church is over here, and like I said, MR's house is in here, and right there is where that Latter-day Saints church would be. Post office over here, and there's that. And so back here is Rossler's house, Marcy Rossler's, right there. So that can kind of give you an ID of how things are. And the blocks are a lot seem bigger than they are nowadays. Making a van out of you. So here's the Lumberman's Tool Factory. George Burleson owned this. Then you had the Chuck Wellman. Then you had the light plant down through here. They were running electricity. So there's the Wellman Mill. This, one of them, the first ones. The view from the pond. George Stone's house over here, Bank of Boardman.
That's our
And you can see the stuff up here with the Wellman Mill. October 06. Well, once again, people get really confused. Sometimes they'll say, well, that picture's from that time period. Well, that's just because something is postmarked or it's wrote on, don't mean it's from that time period. I'll tell you why. Because in October 1906, that did not exist anymore. So this is inside the Wellman Mill that we just saw. Chuck Wellman, right here, very young Chuck Wellman. So South Boardman, they would produce clothespins, cant hook handles. We got a cant hook handle in the museum in Fife Lake that was produced in the mill. They had a bowl factory, wooden bowl factory. They had all sorts of industry going at different times. And there's another one inside the Wellman Mill. And you might recognize this one from the Yankee Boy. This is inside the Lumberman's Tool Company, where they're making presses. George Burleson, and actually the owner had, what was he working down at a shop down in Grand Rapids for some period of time before he started getting the equipment up here to South Boardman. Well, he ended up marrying Chuck Wellman's sister, I believe, or something like that. But anyways, I can't remember how it ties in. But he was a pattern maker. Basically, today's would be tool and die or mold maker. He would be up on that level. But anyways, he started doing that. So, and there's like another view across the road. W.D. Ellis's house, which would be Dick's great-grandpa's house across there, which is at the cove in South Boardman. If anybody knows the lay of the Boardman Pond, you got like a cove, like an armature. Yeah, it's right there. Wellman house up through there. September 25th, 1906. And like I said, that postcard was from October of 06, and it showed everything there. Well, like I said, it was gone. In September, everything was gone. Those three businesses that I was talking about, the power, the the Welland Mill, the Lumberman Tool Factory, all gone. This was entitled, and this is an Elvin Ellis negative, and this was simply captioned, "Under the Electric Lights." Under the electric lights. And there's the power plant, so after the power plant went out, they're in town, they put one further on the river, and so that's it under construction. You can see the one chute here. Another view of it.
Covered in trees now.
Yeah, all covered in trees now. And there's Blackman. Oh, what the heck was his name? Help me out. I can't think of his first name. Anyways, spearing. Not guaranteed they're spearing for trout, because that's what he in that stream. So he had it for a while, and there's the boy, was it Wilbur? What was his name? I can't think of it. Too much stuff in my mind. But anyways, fishing. And that's another Ellis photo. So was the other one, Elvin Ellis. So eventually, Charles Sessions. Now, Charles Sessions moved a lot of buildings around the area. Matter of fact, he moved and I mentioned before that he had built helped move the library to its present location, or the old library, the old schoolhouse, where it nearly got away from him. There was a lot of damage because the team of horses got away from him. But Charlie Sessions always moving stuff. So Charlie, neat thing about him, he kept journals, but it's kind of sad. So this is the sad part. I got a journal from the 30s that I got from my good buddy Dick here, that he had in his family, that Charlie had wrote in the 30s, where he was referencing back when he was a kid, like in the 1880s or some doggone thing at Barker Creek. So he was keeping journals all the way back. So here's one from 14, where he's like, "I sent a statement to William Blackman," there you go, "regarding the purchase of the electric light plant." And that's January 26, 1914. So then, so right here, he made the first payment February 24th for $250 for the light plant. Charlie then went from moving houses, I suspect he maybe it still might have been moving houses, I don't know, but basically the owner of the light plant. And I would like to thank right now my good buddy Boss Ross Gearing up to South Boardman. You know, just he wasn't there, but he was there. His knowledge is just out of this world, and this is a book that I had copied out of him. But at Blackman, you know, more Blackman stuff where light bills collected to date, 56.59, collected for Mrs. Blackman, $8.50. But you can go into some of the stuff where he was buying light fixtures and stuff. Now, South Boardman had electricity. They had electricity, and it's something to think about. So when that finally went out, in the mid-20s, they didn't get power in South Boardman until the RVA came in the 1940s.
Wow.
So you went from having color TV, well, not really, but you know what? You went from having electricity to having nothing again. Nothing. Can you fathom? They had 20 years of electricity. Houses had electricity. The businesses had electricity. They were running lights. It was moving. So we're going to go to the Thompson Edition, which is Traverse Street, Boardman Road, the Hainstock block, later known as Monroe block. So we would have Hainstock Hardware, the Strickler Opera House would have been upstairs, Wilson's Grocery Bank of Boardman, L.D. Musser. Also, Strickler's also, they had an undertaking business there, and there might be a few other businesses I can't recollect real quick. So the area that I'm talking right now would be this area right here. So you got the Legion right here with the tank, directly across the road between. East,
You're down a block.
oh, my bad. Yep. Good catch. Paying attention.
Legion's on the west side
Yeah.
of West Main.
Yep. So across the road from the Legion.
You're south of block.
Go up to the left. There you
You're
go.
at Boardman
Go up,
Street,
Another block.
Boardman Road.
go up that big square up above Main Street. That's the Legion.
Yeah.
No, you're
That's
on Boardman
Boardman
Street. You gotta go up to
It's
Boardman.
west of West Main.
Oh yeah.
There you go.
I'm up. I'm right there.
There you are.
Yeah, I saw Boardman, that street. So yeah, it's gonna be Boardman Road. Yeah, so we're right there.
Right there.
That's where it is. Good catch. Oops. So there's that Monroe building block. LD Mustard Store. Then of course, the Traverse City Record Eagle from May 10th, 1907, when the murder that had taken place off that building where the Mr. Wilson shot his wife in the back of the head and lost, 3 children, and the one child had to go. The youngest child ended up going to the person who was clerking for their store, and the other 2 children went to another relative. But yeah, and I believe she is buried in South Boardman. I think she's one of the unmarked graves because when the fire came through, it wiped out the cemetery records. So people went back there as memory to figure out where people were buried in South Boardman. So, but her mom and dad are buried down in, I think, Indiana, and she is not down there with them. So potentially she is in an unmarked grave in South Boardman. Another view of it. Because she would run down the stairs and got taken care of, so unfortunately. West Main Street Business Directory, Olin Hotel, Raby Millinery. That Charles Murray store, I believe, would have been about right where the Legion is nowadays. So, like I said, there's like a whole host of things. It's like, if you got one building there, but it might have been depending what year or what time of the year, what business was in there, just like here in Fife Lake. Okay, well, you had this building, well, it wasn't always that, it was this and it was that. Okay, what time period are we talking about? So that's how we are right now. So we're in, everybody agree? Before I go here?
Yes.
Okay, West Main Street. The Legion is over here. Post office here. And we were just talking about this area, so we're gonna be coming down this side right here, down West Main. So there's the big Olin Hotel, and I think that burnt down in 22. Now, I don't have my Grandma Betty's stuff with me, my mom has that, but I know in her family record book, she had, one of her relatives was, a child was born in that hotel. One of her relatives had had a child in that hotel. But you can see where they'd have the tracks, or this would be going to the boards going to the depot. Millinery Store Hotel. And there's part of that block over there yet. It's funny to think all that stuff was in there at one time. There's in front of the hotel. Another Ellis picture. More Ellis. Big Olin Hotel. Nice big postcard stand in there. I like that. I'd like to have those. Once again. So Traverse Street, Boardman Road, north. Rathford's, Raby's, Bank of Boardman, Post Office, Darling's Meat Market, Grand Homes, Hunter, Bellinger, Penny, Schaefer, Green stores, whole slew of stores, Leach Brothers Hardware, Taylor's Store, Atkins Restaurant, so the Oddfellows Hall, Baptist Church, unknown store, Mike Raleigh, Blacksmith Shop. That's everything up through there. And like I said, different suspensions in time, those names change. And certainly could be more than that. You don't know. So once again, everybody has agreements. We're looking down through here from the post office, and we're gonna cut up to about right here. We're gonna actually jump the street on School Street, because Mike Raleigh's locksmith shop was up into here. Now it's interesting to note too that I was talking about Leadersons, you know, they lived on Travers Street too. Elmer Huff lived somewhere on Travers Street at one time when he was a little boy. So there's J.J. Raby's Jewelry, Millinery Store. Another picture of it. Looking down, and that's looking to the east. Pretty impressive. You can see the
So what do you think-
Baptist church steeple.
What do you think that says on the right over there? R-E-S-T,
King's Restaurant.
restaurant, okay.
We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. Trust me. And it'll blow you away. So up here, whoopsie daisy. So up on the hill, that's Frank Leach's house up there. That'd be you know, what approximately where the school, the parking lot is up there for 22 to 9. And I'm looking for this if anybody sees that big clock out somewhere. And that's Darlene's Meat Market right there. Leach Brothers Hardware. Darlene's Meat Market there. That's Frank Leach right there. Frank was the brother to Howard Leach, and Frank and Howard were the sons to that Wesley Leach that I spoke about earlier, being about one of the Captain Wesley Leach, who was the first one in there, and like I said, his brother would have been that DeWitt Clinton Leach, who was one of the big boys who came here to Fife Lake first when they first came to Fife Lake to when they were finding bodies of water that hadn't been named, and they were going to name the lake Leach Lake, but they decided to name it after William H. Fife, and so it's Fife Lake instead of Leach Lake. So, nice one here. I assume that's Young People's Literary Society, I suspect. I don't know. So, there you go. There's the Baptist Church in the background. And that is the Oddfellows Hall right there. Rebecca Lodge, stuff like that, the Masonic. Yeah, Dick, you know anything?
I don't know. I don't recognize them.
Yeah, no, you don't. I'm giving you a hard time, Dick.
Well, but I had some good aunts that had a lot of pictures taken in groups like that.
Oh, okay.
They weren't in that one.
Yeah. So there's a group of men from the Oddfellows group there in South Boardman. Some of the ladies from the Rebecca Lodge. So they would come into Fife Lake or vice versa, I suspect. But we got some pictures here in Fife Lake of the Rebecca Lodge that had came in, and they were working with the Fife Lake Rebecca Lodge. So the South Boardman and Fife Lake people were mixed in of the Rebecca Lodge. So one person to note right there is Ava Leach. Now she was his daughter, or the wife of Howard Leach, and we have one of her dresses in the museum here in Fife Lake in the parlor area. So we got a mannequin with one of the dresses that she would have owned back in the day on there. Of course, the GAR vets, Civil War veterans. I don't think that I can't recollect what year that post disbanded in South Boardman. It was relatively early compared to considering that there were still men around that there were quite a few GR veterans around. Now, when that post disbanded, the membership dispersed. Some of them would go to the Fife Lake here, to the Frank Fowler post here in Fife Lake, or they go up to the Colonel Baker one up to Kalkaska. So, but like I said, I don't know the timeline of that post, but I do know that it disbanded fairly early in respect to the amount of Civil War veterans that were still alive. So there's a picture of the the Baptist church, like I said, to the east on Boardman Road or Traverse Street. Whoops, sorry. And there's that unknown house. Unknown store. I don't know what the heck. I don't know what the heck that was. Near does Boss Ross. But you can see the Baptist church beside it. And somebody might recognize this little fella right here.
Yeah.
That's Dick's dad. That's Fred Ellis. That's Elvin's son, his oldest son. Elvin Ellis, the photographer. There's Mike Rowley's blacksmith shop. But that guy said that would have been a little further to the east there on Boardman Road, before you start making that ramp up. So this is what I'm talking about. Because I told Boss Ross, I said, well, did you know this? Did you know that? He's like, I didn't know that. I said, yeah, I got something on Ross Gary. I'm pretty stoked. Because it's really hard when you're trying to know Fife Lake stuff, you're trying to know South Boardman stuff and Walton Junction stuff and all this other stuff, and you got a wife and kids to take care of and 50 eyes of brown chickens. Yeah, I said 50 eyes of brown chickens. You got a lot going on in your life. So to try and get things, in order. And I said, but this is case in point, where stores, names change, and they can change quick, and nobody will know. And so right here, that CA hooker, now I think that might have been a relation out onto my side, because there's hookers from that vicinity who came up here to conduct business, and it only lasted like a month. And then soon J.J. Raby, because the hookers are out of Everett, and that's where, anyways, the Huff stuff. Anyways, the new newspaper to be launched in South Boardman can be soon J.J. Raby. So we saw J.J. Raby, he had one of the stores. I'd show you pictures of that, but he used to be former of the Belding Banner. He has decided to locate here. So in 1905, he's going to be starting a newspaper. But there was already a Boardman River current going. And I don't have a picture of the guy, but Wilkie White up here in Fife Lake had the Fife Lake Monitor. I think it started in 1900. And so I think he took that over in 99 or 1900. Anyways, later on he was publishing a paper within the Fife Lake Monitor, which was the Boardman River current that was in there. So Wilkie White was doing that, so not only was he producing this and that, but not only that, Wilkie White's brother, Elmer White, was the sheriff in Calcasas County, but I don't have his picture up there, but I get too busy. So, talks about King's Restaurant. You asked me, was that a restaurant back there? Yeah, that's a restaurant. King's Restaurant. So, you got William King here, Noel King, and Alicia Gulleroy. So this is really stinking rare, and you guys know it. 1905, African American family running the business. Yeah. They have the money to do it. How awesome would it have been to talk to these people? Getting goosebumps now. But I believe, so William was the son to Noel, and she's the granddaughter, so I suspect that he must have had a daughter that had passed or something, because she was actually born down in Louisiana. And if you look in the federal census in South Boardman from 10, she's listed as a seamstress, he's listed as an owner of the restaurant, and he's listed as a businessman, worker, or whatever. So, another picture. So that'd be the King's Restaurant, and that's looking. So, like I said, now we're on the opposite side of Traverse Street. We're on the south side. We're actually looking west. We're about midway down. This building would have been just to the west of where the current Boardman Museum is, the old bank, the old post office, So that's where this place would have been. So after he left, they left South Boardman, I think about 10, So in, I think 11 or thereabouts, they started the hotel in Kalkaska. So they actually went from a restaurant here in South Boardman for 5 years to owning a hotel in Kalkaska. And then I read somewhere in 1914 where they were putting stuff up for estate sale or auction or something. So unfortunately, it didn't last for long there either. But I've tried to hunt down where they landed. There's limited information, obviously, probably because of the color of their skin. So once again, we're looking back down, and this is Traverse Street, Boardman Road, looking to the west. So King's Restaurant right there. Right here would be the little museum down in here. There's the Oddfellows Hall. The modern day post office is down in here. The Monroe block, or the Hainstock block, where the poor woman was murdered. Yankee Boys up and through here, 131. And this is School Street right here. And there's the school. It's a shame, that we not only we lost the Boardman school, but we lost our Fife Lake school, the brick school, with the merger and stuff. I did some reading on that, and that was part of the deal that, if Fife Lake and South Boardman to get together, then, basically their schools are going to be torn down. So we lost our beautiful old South Boardman school, then our brick Fife Lake school. Now I know for a fact that this would be the second South Boardman school. I don't know where the other one was at, but this might have been actually the third South Boardman school. I don't know. But right now, I'm not even looking at, like I said, I could go out into the wider country to do the one-room schoolhouses around the area of South Boardman and stuff, but I'm not doing that. I'm sticking in South Boardman proper. But Althea, my great-grandma, would say that when it was cold out, that her teacher would run them up and down the stairs in here to get them warm in the wintertime, because it'd be so cold in there, just up and down the stairs to get warm. Then my grandpa, the first day of school here, Mom, I think he peed his pants or some doggone thing. So he ran all the way back home. He left school and ran home that day out of kindergarten. But that's when they lived, that house right next to Edna there on, what's your street? Dago, yes, thank you. In the old Byron Doty house.
That was a story you always liked to tell us.
Yeah, that was a story he told us, but probably hated school just like his grandson. So there's the Boardman Cornet Band. Seems like every what small town, village, city, whatever had bands back in the day, and that's taken from the school.
Looks like you had that one family in there too.
Pardon me?
The black family, looks like one that maybe that second one on the front there, on the right. He's in there. I don't know if that was the gentleman you had preaching.
Yeah, it had kind of big features. Could be. So there was a guy. So Ed Beebe, probably one of the greatest photographers in northern Michigan, had a big crew going and taking a lot of pictures and stuff like that. Well, Ed Beebe happened to be superintendent of the Boardman of school for some time, and I think in 1903 he left. So that's Ed Beebe right there, and I believe these are the Dawes brothers, Leo and Leslie. This could be Ferguson, and this could be David Whipple. I don't know. I'm just throwing out photographers you guys don't know. But anyways, Ed Beebe with his camera. He left the Boardman school and went up to work at the Griffin Photography Studio in Kalkaska in 1903. And then from there, he went out on his own, and he really made a name for himself. I mean, he was taking pictures all over. And there's, of course, the Methodist Church still standing today on the corner of Dago and Church, obviously. We're paying attention. I like picking on Annie. And the Latter-day Saints Church, like I said, that would have been over there where we're by MR in that circle area. And I'm gonna toss this one up. So this one is at the Latter-day Saints Church. Now, it's not as big as you think it is. So it's been like a 2 or 3 day meeting, a conference. So in here you would have had people from the surrounding other Latter-day Saint congregations in the different communities around that they would have came here to South Boardman. So it's like so they would have took that big panoramic yard long picture. Yo.
Were Herb and Madeline Bechtel, have anything to do with that?
Yes. His definitely Herb's mom would have been around during this time because she was friends with my great grandma. So East Main Business Directory through the years, and you notice a lot 28 was freaking happening. There was a lot happening in lot 28. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. So the Irishman and the Jews story, you're like, well, anyways, it was Joy Nazard. So obviously one's Irish, one was Jew. So that was the name of their store. So they had a store in Kalkaska, and they had one here in Boardman for a short stint. And I think they might even had one over at Spencer. Don't quote me on that though. And then eventually they would have had one in Traverse City. But so Irishman and the Jew store, the Brackenberry store, Ellis's photo studio. Alvin Ellis would have had a lot of Alvin Ellis's studio stuff was taken up in the front of that building. You can see some of his studio stuff. You can see like the windows, because he was using natural light, you know, for his glass negative camera. So, and then we got let me see what am I looking at. Too much going on. It'll come to me. Oh, Burleson's. Do I have Burleson's? Do I see Burleson's?
Lot 35.
Too much stuff. Once again, you guys passed. Was that my cousin that said that?
It was.
Yeah, thanks. She's not really my cousin, but I like to let her think she is because she feels good about herself
Well, we
when she
are
says
because
something.
I found
Yeah,
it.
yeah. So we're looking at where am I? Where am I? Where am
A
I?
little bit to the left, there you go.
Yeah, right there. So I'm right here. Yep. So the post office is right here. And so once again, we got the American Legion over here with the tank. So here's the railroad tracks. So in between would have been the depot with a sidewalk. Now, mind you, South Boardman had cement sidewalks too. They weren't, it's, just because a community is what it is today, is small or whatever, don't mean at one time it was not happening. You know, and that's something I want to kind of show to people.
Some of the sidewalks are still there from the depot.
Right? And not only that, unless somebody's removed it, the at the Latter-day Saints Church where that stood is also the cement
Loading dock?
for getting in, on and off carriages, buggies. It's, what, about that tall? Right? Yeah. I got a date when that was put in too, FYI. I don't have it with me. So we're going to be running all the way down in this country. So we're going to be taking a look at, so Boss Ross's house is right here, Wendell Gehring's house, here on the corner of Mill and Main Street. Now the creamery would have been right here. Charlie Sessions' house would have been right here. Alvin Ellis would have had a house right here, but eventually it would have been over here when Dick would have known him, when he was old enough to know his grandpa. And so, and the Anderson boarding house would have been at Galtiers. Thank you. That's like trying to catch it. So Galtiers. Then over here would have been I think at one time they might have had a potato warehouse there. The way Boss Ross talked, it's kind of like everywhere else, you know, they had potato house, like maybe moved around like 3 or 4 different times, you know, depending what period of time. They would have one out on here somewhere, then the one over here, but then they would have this area for cattle too. My cousin Myron Bridson had talked about his dad bringing cattle to Boardman. Now he said Fife Lake, but I know he misspoke. But he was talking there. He was talking there, to go there. So, once again, here we go. 1907, 1908, Michigan Gazetteer. We're at the pinnacle, we're at the height, we're at the summit, you know, whatever you want to use. This is where we're at right now in South Boardman history. This is it. This is it. This is the time to be in South Boardman. Because it's only going to go down from here, and I know, it's a sad day. It hurts me too. It hurts me too. But as far as business-wise and all that, it goes down from here. This is it. Population, what, 600 people? Fife Lake at this time in 1907, 1908 had 800 people, 200 more people. But if you look at the number of stores and stuff like that, South Boardman is right there with them. Right there stinking with Fife Lake. But it's a logging town. It's a town that has been built up upon logging and lumber industry. So, like I said, it's getting depleted, it's going away, it's not coming back. And then the only thing that's going to save this place is that lake. That's what saved Fife Lake. Because we could be like so many other small towns, named Spencer, Sigma, Walton Junction, you know, South Boardman, all these places that were once thriving communities. They had multiple stores, actually had post offices, actually had working post offices, and then to nothing again. 1909, Michigan Gazetteer, following year. Quite the list. See, so right there, the Strickler Hardware, Furniture, and Undertaking. And this is all from the 1909 Michigan Gazetteer. Michigan Gazetteer lists, so there's William King, restaurant, Frank LeVar, grocer. We're going to be meeting Frank LeVar's stuff here in a little bit. A.B. Doherty. Yeah, Polly's. So A.B. Doherty's in there. Boardman Creamery. Boardman News. That William Bristow cement block building that we looked at before. C.A. Brott. General Store. So we'll go on.
Do you think they had cement sidewalks because of the cement company?
I don't know. That's an early stinking picture. Early. This came out of the Joyce collection. I like to call it the Joyce collection. Joyce's were in South Boardman in the 1880s. And I know for a fact, I can't prove it, but his boy was taking pictures. His boy was taking pictures early on. Even though they're not marked Joyce, this is one of them. And I have a few more, but I don't have them in the set tonight. Because I get like gross overload and everything, because I'm probably going to get yelled at for having so much stuff in here anyways. But, you know, the depot would be out and over here, and there's just like sticking nothing out through there now, right? And you can see the Methodist Church.
Some of them trees are still there.
Yeah, but I mean, the Olin Hotel, nothing's up through now. None of that had been built.
So one interesting thing is you see that track in the background there? That one, yeah?
Yeah.
If you go across West Main Street from the Legion Post, you can still see part of the road bed as it cuts between Boardman Road and East Main.
Okay. Thanks. and that's the Leach Brothers store, or Howard Leach's store. His wife, Ava, would have worked there too. But not only that, I've shown before where I have some of the documentation where she'd worked at some of the, at Dibert School and at the Clark School here in Fife Lake, because she was a school teacher back in the day. But anyways, I've been to the store, but that's Howard Leach right there. But that building would have stood right on the corner of,
Boardman, East Main.
East Main and Traverse Street. And there it is again, looking down, looking to the south. And like I said, they would have a whole slew of people in there at one time. And there's a really good shot. There we go, the Irishman and the Jew clothiers, you can't miss it. Get off the train, there it is. Go get some clothes. Baptist Church, the Odd Fellows, Leach Brothers Hardware, all the way down through here. Looking down there, that bad boy still stands. That building still stands today.
Go down, check it out.
The old town hall, right there, by Boss Ross's. That is the only thing there right now. Out of everything through there, everything is gone. Everything's been burnt down, tore down, whatever, gone. But mostly, it all got burnt down. There's Dr. Neihart's dogs. People are people. People have always been people. I got pictures of people with their cats, with their dogs, from way back, even the old-timey pictures. People love their pets. We've always loved our pets. So it's nothing to have people take pictures of their pets. But that's in front of that building. And there's Brackenberry, Fred Brackenberry's bazaar. Poor Josie died in 1914 of tuberculosis. But Alvin would have been somewhere in this vicinity taking pictures. I know his studio would have been in there because you can see sometimes in the backdrop. And but this is before he was in there. But that's Alvin's studio right here beside it with all the pictures. So we'll talk a little bit about Alvin Ellis. Like I said, we got Dick here, who's Alvin's grandson. But December 24th, 1902, Alvin is married to Eddie Teal Ellis, Eddie Teal, and married by her dad, or his dad, W.D. Ellis, would be Dick's great-grandfather. I did not know Dick was going to be here tonight. Glad he is.
How you do?
But I like to show, a lot of people talk about the men. It was the men doing this or men doing that. Well, a lot of the men that couldn't do the things they were doing if it wasn't for the women, the support of the women with them. So I felt I need to show, because generally I would just show pictures of Alvin. But Eddie, the Teal homestead would be out on Quarterline Road, where Chuck Seating's mom lives, out in that vicinity.
Yeah. Right next door.
Pardon me?
Right next door.
Right next door, right in that kind of open area where the Teal homestead would have been. And so April 1911, so here's one of Alvin's brothers, Clyde. So April 1911, he did something that he never had done before, and he signed his negative April 1911. He wouldn't date it. And the reason why he dated it, because in April 1911, he took his last stinking picture in South Boardman. So he took pictures from 1901 to 1911 in South Boardman. But not only that, he was taking pictures down the Chase, which is just a few miles to the west on US 10 out of Reed City, small community. Once again, there's nothing there again. He was a photographer down there before he moved up here, because I have some of his stationery where it says return in 10 days to ARLS, Reed City, Michigan. But anyways, April 1911, he quit taking pictures. He would eventually become a postman or a mailman, and he ended up selling it to Homer Doty, who had a studio. They would have been friends through church and stuff, but he would have had a studio also in Traverse City. and he took a few pictures. There's very few pictures marked Doty in South Boardman, but Homer got around quite a bit too. But so Edna's house currently, where Edna Gary lives, was owned by Cyrus and Ella Doty, Ella Lampkin Doty, and the house next door. So the big house next door would have been owned by Byron and Christina Doty. Then they would eventually move to Traverse. And that, I think that was about the same time period that Althea and Elmer got married and bought the house from Cyrus and Ella and lived in the house where Edna lives currently. Then like a year or so later, they ended up purchasing the home next door where Byron and Christina had lived. So another picture of the, so looking back at Traverse Street, there's Board and Main Street. Another view of it. Post office. So not only was Howard Leach doing, had to run the business, he was running the, you know, the store and the hardware store, but he also postmaster. And there's his daughter Myrna. Many of you people would remember Myrna as an old lady. Yep. I think, and were you saying that you liked her hats? Who was saying that they liked, because all the hats that she's wearing for Sunday? Or,
Oh, no, she had her hair was just like
Okay.
super white, and she had always wore the beehive.
Okay.
This was the 70s, but yeah, she had a white beehive hair.
okay. Franklin Bar Grocer. This is all, and this is Eugene Perkins. Or no, is it this? Just a second, yeah. So this is Eugene Perkins. Billiard hall, saloon, so on and so forth. And Eugene Perkins, or excuse me, John Perkins. John Perkins, his dad was Eugene that had the grist mill. So when you're a store owner, you can have a pet bear cub, okay? So he had a pet bear. He had a fancy boat to be out on the Boardman Pond, and a car. But that's John right there, John Perkins, and that's Howard.
Is that the corner house there, like across from
That's,
the Legion? Or no?
No, that's,
Oh, okay, Dangle?
Lisa.
you don't have to give out your address.
The stone house behind the post office.
The stone house behind the post office.
Oh, okay.
So Leonard,
Wasn't stone
yeah, so
there.
Perkins would have had it, then my great-grandma's uncle Leonard Stover would have had this house too. Then it's, I don't know, maybe changed hands a few times, and eventually Gordon Aldridge owned it, and Gordon, you know, he had the store in South Boardman. He had one in here in Fife Lake too in 1931. Funny, during the Depression, he started a store. Who does that? Gordon Aldridge started the store, and Pete Naylor's old store here, where the DNR boat launches on the lakeside, where the parking lot area. That's about where Pete Naylor's store was, and that's where Gordon Aldridge had his store. But anyways, that was Gordon Aldridge. So Burleson's Tavern, George Burleson. So we heard a little bit about George Burleson earlier. George Burleson had the Lumberman Tool Company. Well, later on, after the Lumberman Tool Company burnt down, he got into the tavern business. Electric lights, steam heat, inside closet, remodeled and refurnished. And I didn't copy the backside because it has kind of a naughty poem on it. And yeah, it put you to shame, girl. No, I gotta give Polly a hard time. She's always doing these poems and stuff. She's a jokey jokester, so I know she can take it. She can take it. So George Burleson, he did that. So eventually, that burnt down. So then at the time his brothers were doctors down in Grand Rapids, Burleson and Burleson. So he got with his brothers, went down to Grand Rapids. They put him through school and he became a doctor too. So it probably was Burleson. So George Burleson would eventually become a doctor.
What's the
Oh.
$2 to
$3 a day in a tavern.
That's staying in there.
It says rates $2 per day.
That's the guy.
Hotel.
It's a hotel too.
Boarding house.
Boarding house, yeah. Well, here's another little thing, how communities are tied together. So George Burleson's daughter was married for 2 years to Arthur Hodges. Arthur Hodges was the son to Jim Hodges, who owned the hardware here in Fife Lake. And they had a child together. So there's a tie there between the Burlesons and the Hodges of Fife Lake. Burleson's Tavern there. I always liked your grandpa, how he was always saying, well, that one picture of July 3rd, 1907, I'm pretty sure that shows snow there. You ever hear him say?
Yeah, there was one,
Yeah.
Grandpa wasn't born until 1922, but he does remember, people telling him that there was a July 4th weekend somewhere
Where there
where
was
he was born.
a little bit of snow.
Where there was snow on the 4th of July.
Right.
Boardman.
Yeah. So Glenn was always trying to look at this picture and always trying to find the snow in it and stuff. I always liked that old Glenn. He is a wonderful man. He was a true American hero, World War II veteran, flew a bomber during D-Day, stuff like that. So not many around like that.
We'll just call it snow then.
We'll call it snow in memory of Glenn Gehring. And that's in front of the Russell Tavern. That's John Perkins. Got some pike in there. I didn't look through it too hard. Maybe a couple trout there, maybe. Suckers. Suckers, yeah. And that's inside the tavern right there.
Yeah, it is.
1904 in the back. On that notice up there.
Yep. Out forward. Looking back. There's the depot. And there's the Olin Hotel. So once again, we're looking from East Main Street over to West Main Street with the depot in between us. Oh, I never noticed that before. That's Wellman and Company, South Boardman, Michigan. It's amazing when things blow up. Another picture of the depot. That one block that we looked, you know.
There it is.
Yeah,
Snow.
it's fuzzy. It's fuzzy.
Yeah.
That was probably, yeah.
That was July.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll go.
There's your July photo.
Yeah.
So, the creamery. We're still out on, don't tell me, East Main Street. We're right past Mill Street. Mill Street is right in here. Main's through here. So there's a creamery. Here's the Anderson boarding house right here. So that corner intersection is right here. Boss Ross Gehring lives right here. There you go. And I don't think you can pick it. I think it's out. Like Frank Young's grist mill would be over here and you just can't see it.
How long did the electric plant run?
The 1920s, mid-20s.
Until somebody decided, unless you're gonna include the.
Go
Okay.
ahead.
It flooded because the dams, there was one guy thought the upper pond was a little high. So he said, I'm gonna let a little water out. So he went down to the guy at the next dam and said, I'm gonna let a little water out. So he opened his up, and then they let the guy at the power plant know and said, hey, we're gonna let a little water out. And he goes, I'm fine. He was not fine. And he flooded out.
It's Charlie Sessions. He was fine, man.
He was fine. But yeah, so that's why they didn't have power put in for 20 years, because
Yeah.
everybody was letting water out and he thought he could take some water.
Yeah. So here's another funny thing about Althea, about Charlie Sessions. when I go there and talk about old South Boardman history or whatever, or even Fife Lake for that matter, because they moved to Fife Lake here in the 30s because, like I said, my great grandpa was section foreman for the railroad. But she worked in the school as worked in the cafeteria and stuff, cooking the food, so on and so forth. But she would say, and she would get, her memory was good as far as going back, but how she was tying in the passage of time was not running anymore. Because she's like, you need to go talk to Charlie Sessions. I said, I wish I could talk to Charlie Sessions. Well, go talk to him. You know where he lives, don't you? I said, I don't know specifically where he's at. I kind of know where he's at right now. But I don't know where I can actually talk to him. And she's like, you got to talk to him. He's like, he knows everything. Because he's like the stinking genius of South Boardman. He'd always figure stuff out. But she said, if you talk to him, take some time. Because he's a really slow talker. He talks really slow. So I was like, okay, Grandma. Okay.
And yet he was the one that made it not have electricity? Is that?
No, he said it'd be fine. Bring in more water.
Okay. Oh, he did want it.
Yeah.
What,
Okay.
No, he was told later on,
yeah.
but after the fact.
It seems like they wouldn't have liked the guy then, to me.
Well, it was his dam, but I don't know if he was the one that was there that day. I think it might
Yeah,
have been.
he might have had a worker there.
Yeah, it was the worker.
Well, I mean, that's-
Yeah, I don't think it was, I don't think,
Was it a Pilts that was in there that day?
I know, I was gonna say, if I made you guys not have electric for 20 years,
yeah.
you'd have a lot to say about me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the story how Grandpa explained it, it wasn't Charlie that was there, there was the employee that was there that day,
Yeah.
but, you know,
Yeah, because Charlie couldn't man it 24/7.
yeah.
So there's inside the creamery.
They don't have electricity 24/7. They only have it limited hours, huh?
And there's the Anderson Boarding House. We're going to be talking about the Anderson place here in a little bit. And this is a slight picture. Anybody want to guess where this is at? Any of my South Boardman people? We were just talking about that area. That's Frank Young's grist mill right here. There's the Anderson lumber yard.
So this is the
There's-
upper pond.
No, it's
This
before
is
the, before the
this
pond.
right here
The bridge is up here in the
is East
main.
Main.
Okay.
And this right here is Mill Street. Boss Ross lives right here.
Yeah.
There's the creamery. There's the Anderson Boarding House. There's Frank Young's grist mill. David Davis's place is over here. And they got that little park area over here. And Lockwood comes in over here.
Well, the grist mill used to be down that hole, when you cross the bridge, it's right down that hole there.
Yeah. I'm just trying to give
Yeah.
people general ID. And there's looking back the other way. There's the town hall, it's still standing. Charlie Sessions' place. Elvin Ellis's house. And that's when the
More recent.
museum building or post office, bank, whatever, was where the post office is now. So I found a paper where Wansies were gone for a little bit, Archie Wansies gas station. So they had John and Ida Miller, or excuse me, was it John and Ida, or Althea and Elmer Huff, watching the gas station for a handful of days. So they took their camera down there when they were staying down there. How cool is that? So this is off one of the negatives out of my great grandma's collection. That's my grandpa, and that's his grandpa, John Miller. But and so you can see the stock, I guess it'd probably be the potato house or at that time. What do you think? But that would be where the stockyards is at, where there's a cement pad. You know where I'm talking about?
Yeah.
That cement pad right there. And I don't know what that little building was. And so it's a better view. And there's the stockyard. See the fence?
There's the church place there.
Yeah. And there's the town hall.
It's still there.
Yep, that's still there. But this is at Archie Wansey's gas station. And this negative, I was lucky to get that one because that thing is crisped. It was folded like that. So which brings me back to my first point. Don't throw away any pictures or negatives because I can do something with them. So there's the Boardman Pest House. I don't know where that was at. I suspect it was somewhere out of town. You know, you're gonna have people that have all sorts of problems that are gonna go into that you don't want around the community. Because there was no vaccinations, there was no prenatal care, there was nothing back in the day. You were on your stinking own. So they put people in a pest house, isolate them. So we got Dr. Samuel Neihart right here, and his brother Jonas Neihart, who was pharmacist. Now, Dr. Neihart, you know, obviously one of the doctors in South Boardman. Now, Jonas was also a physician, or a pharmacist in South Boardman, but not only that, he worked for Hiram Labar here in Fife Lake at his drug shop. So he was a pharmacist for Hiram Labar here in one of the brick buildings. Matter of fact, we have some of the old medicine labels in one of the display cases in the museum that says J.J. Neihart, pharmacist, Fife Lake, Michigan. So like I said, he was Jonas Neihart was jumping in between both communities. And there's George Stone. He was owner of the Bank of Boardman. And so I think I kind of got things kind of wonky. I didn't want to come to this one already. So in 1921, 22, that's about all she had left right there.
There was a gentleman that lived to be 104 that was born just outside of Boardman. His name was Carol Dick.
Right.
And he talks about when Boardman burned the second time, that he got in trouble for getting late to school because he rode his bike to go drive to the top of the hill where the Boardman school is now to look at the ashes.
Because I know, it's funny, you said Althea, when she was living in Edna's house there, she stood on the porch that day and watched that whole block burn. She watched it from the block of that house where Edna lives, off that front porch. Althea did. So she'd been, what, in her 20s? I think I got something a little wonky, sorry about that. So that's at Big Anderson now. That right there is Lockwood. That is United Brethren Church, the U of B church. Over here is the Big Anderson Mill. Supposedly, and I believe it, could saw up 100,000 board feet of lumber a day. And there's a book, and I can't recollect the name of the book, but it's in the libraries. But it's they got the logging railroads and stuff like that. But they have the Boardman and Southeastern in there, which is BNSE was the call letters for Aaron Anderson's logging operation. But they were showing rail lines going all the way over to 66 from his locomotives. And there's the grist mill. I think that's one of them other July pictures too. Glenn is gonna come back and get me. When I see him again, he's gonna be so mad at me. Thanks, Polly. Then that's, you know, obviously it was really dire straits. Frank Young would have had it towards the end. And that's his grandson, one of his grandsons of
Frank Young's.
no. Martin Hogerheide would always say that he'd go around with his, because it's Frank Young, South Boardman, Michigan, so he'd go around to different towns and deliver his grandpa's flour and stuff. He's like, my grandpa had the best buckwheat flour, buckwheat mix, blah, 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 whatever around, you know, because Martin was always talking about how his grandpa's flour was the best. Martin Hogerheide. So this is Aaron Anderson. He was kind of a neat guy. He was actually a shoe salesman down in Cadillac in the 1890s. Then he started, and this is his house in Cadillac. And they had since redone it. I took pictures of this several years ago for the Anderson family because they live out in Washington State. Because this is where A.F. Anderson eventually went. So A.F. Anderson had 3 children, a wife, and he had a woman servant too, according to the census records. But anyways, they redid this house, but it had the, what do you call those things? The big ornate wooden,
Cornice.
huh?
Corner post?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So they redid that, and they took them off, and obviously they sold them because they're worth money. So they're no longer there. But anyways, that's A.F. Anderson's house in down the Cadillac. So going from a shoe salesman to this, not only having a big plant in South Boardman with logging trains, with the trains, he had one in Buckley. He eventually would have one in Elba once the one in South Boardman burnt down, but that was a big stinking place. And this is out of the Hardwood Record, was the name of this publication. And there is his, there's his offices in Cadillac, big old building. There's kind of a big view of some of the yard of it. One of the trains. The thing was a behemoth. My great grandma said that her dad would come home at lunch, because I just lived there on School Street, across from where Keith Petty's sister, what was her name? Jane. Across from where Jane lived on School Street is where the John Miller residence was. So he would walk from this area known as Slab Town to their house, grab Althea, and take her back to the mill, and she'd get on one of the trams and just ride the tram around the whole complex here.
What'd they power the mill with?
Steam.
Steam?
And this is a rare thing too. I'm kind of an Elvin Ellis. I like stalking dead people. So yeah, it's kind of a bad thing. So
They don't.
if you're really into history and stuff, and you're really into your stuff, you start noticing little nuances. So look, if Elvin was out of an area, he would mark something, A.R. Ellis, South Boardman, Michigan. It might be, he might have took the picture in Cadillac, he might have took the picture in Kingsley, he might have took the picture in Traverse City, East Jordan, so on and so forth. You get the idea. So he would always have that down there, so people would know who to contact if they wanted copies of this image from him, because he's selling postcards, because he's a photographer. But this is the only one I've seen of Ellis stuff that can be directly related to South Boardman that has his South Boardman, Michigan on it. There's in the saw room at Anderson's, one of them, smaller set I guess they're working on. There's the office. Some of the machinery. There you go, Jerry. Inside the Anderson yard mill. So yeah, so there's my great grandpa, or great great grandpa, Althea's dad. So like I said, he'd come home, he'd grab her, and she'd get on this tram, and just get on and follow them, get on that, and she'd go around it on the rails and stuff, go around that whole place. And this is actually Leo Ellis here. That's Dick's grandpa's brother, one of the brothers. So. And actually that Andrew Linderblade, or Linderblad, was actually married to Carrie Lederson. You'd remember Ledersons, or Lederson's related to me. Elmer's mom was a Lederson. Her name was Carrie, so she was married to a Hoff, a Lederson, and somebody else. Anyway, she was married to this guy right here too, who was like the foreman at Anderson's. It's more of the Andersons. So, 1912 was a boiler explosion. The Wellman mill blew up. Althea was saying that, because like I said, they lived on the other side of the pond there, and her mom was brushing her hair that day. At that time, the noon whistle, you know, been over to the Buckley Old Agent Show, they got the steam whistles and stuff going all the time. So the steam whistle would have went off at the Wellman mill for lunch, and it was about a little bit later on, this huge explosion. So Ida said, "Come on, let's go find Daddy. Let's go find Daddy, or Papa, whatever." So they went running down to find John Miller, and she got to that Wellman house, and she made Althea stay on the steps of that Wellman house that still stands there in the corner of Lockwood and Boardman. Well, they eventually found John Miller, but she said South Boardman was just stirring. It was just like boiling with people, and I imagine because that bad boy blew, that boiler blew. So one of the men killed the men. So one dog was killed, and William Larkin here was killed that day too, and John Miller was severely injured. His hand was mangled, several ribs were broke. Several men from the church over a handful of time had to move him on sheets on the bed so he could keep on moving and stuff like that. And that's one of the things I always complain about. I said, I'm not as strong as John Miller. I always compare myself to John Miller, you know, because he was a tough old bird and I wasn't. We're good. It's 8:20.
There was no place to take him. Grandma said that he stayed in a darkened room. And when I was a little girl, I was always afraid of him, but he lost his thumb and he'd sit in a rocking chair, and we still have a rocking chair that has the marks of his constant just rubbing on that rocking chair.
So he had lost a thumb later on in life because he has them all right there. Right? Amputated. Because I knew it messed him up good. So he probably had to take it eventually. But anyway, it's like there's Port Sherman with him next to the house. Edna's house is right here. There's a house next door. And that's Port Sherman, who was the last living Civil War veteran out of Kilcastle County. So 21, 22, we're at the end of it. So there's the fire that took her out. And never to be rebuilt again, that block on East Main Street. And that's the Nyhart place right there in the back, right? Would that be Nyhart?
No.
No?
Yeah,
Would have to.
no, I don't think so, cause there wouldn't be another house behind it.
It almost looks like the house there on the next road there on Maple.
Okay,
And then I think that's, the house is currently there still, I think.
okay.
He's got that, the guy has all that, business stuff going on.
Yeah.
He put a fence around it and all that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a sad ending, Craig.
Sorry. Well, not all endings are happy.
Well, what's happening?
It's life.
Thank you very much, Greg, as always, very informative and entertaining, yes. Thank you very much.
What do you want me to do to spruce it up?
I'm gonna help you with your endings.
Okay.
I'm gonna get out.
Well, the Yankee Boy restaurant's still going.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Post office is in one.
Post office has not been shut down. They've been talking about it, shutting it down, but it's still going,
That old fellow who keeps crashing into it is trying to make it shut down.
right? And then, gas station's still there.
Yeah.
We're good.
There, we're good. The museum.
Yeah.
Yeah.